Welcome to Positive Filter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career with a little self-help around the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope that what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Positive Filter listeners, it's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Filter, or Philip, a.k.a. Positive Filter, a.k.a. The Illest, a.k.a. I got too many nicknames, a.k.a. I love Austin, Texas, a.k.a. GMU's finest, a.k.a. Wholesome Brother Alpha Phi Alpha. So with me, I'm joined by Tiffany. Go ahead, can you introduce yourself to the listeners, please?
Hi, everyone. This is Tiffany J, also known as Young Buck, Alpha Kappa Alpha, George Mason University, kombucha drinker, margarita maker, salad lover.
I love it. I love it. And so just to give you an explanation to the listeners, Tiffany and I went to grad school together at George Mason in counseling, and we definitely have, crossed paths as alumni, and we both have a big calling to helping others and serving others in the community through our different avenues of counseling. Me more particularly career counseling, and Tiffany and in the public. I think you're correct. You were in the schools. Now you were in the community. Now you're back in the schools. If that's correct.
Yes, that's correct.
But particularly I wanted to bring Tiffany onto the show now because she has a different aspect of how she is helping serve the community and making people's lives better. So Tiffany, go ahead and explain how you're doing that in a different lane right now.
All right. So I currently work in the school system as a substance abuse counselor. So I'm trained, of course, as a licensed professional counselor, but I have additional certifications. So before I worked in the school setting, the majority of my clinical experience was working in jails and in probation settings. So I did about 5 to 6 years in those settings. I often tell people that I was incarcerated / I did a bid for 5 to 6 years.
Oh, did a bid, locked up. It won't let me out anytime.
So, yeah, I learned a lot about street life, substance abuse, mental health, and all of that stuff. But while I was in there, I got really interested in food and how food was also important for recovery. Because a lot of times the guys that I was working with who were incarcerated, of course, while they were using drugs, they weren't feeding their temples the appropriate nutrients. But when I first started paying attention to food was actually in graduate school. Because you remember how we used to have, like, the long classes, and then sometimes we would have 2 classes back-to-back, and each class was 3 hours. So I remember being on campus for, like, a 4:20 p.m. class, but not leaving campus until, like, 10 p.m. So I would have to pack snacks and dinner and all of that stuff. And I remember looking at my white classmates and looking at the food that they brought, and it looked different than the food that I brought. And I started to put 2 and 2 together and started thinking about how white people tended to live longer than black people. So that so that put it in my head where, okay, I need to change some of my habits. And then, of course, working in the jail. So, yeah, it kind of started with grad school, and then I just let it fly from there.
And I find like that's a very interesting realm of how you come to dieting. You came at it from more of a social, racial point of view. Most people, when I think they start a diet, they look at themselves in the mirror and they say, I'm out of shape, I'm not feeling good, I'm overweight, I'm whatnot. And I'll be totally transparent to listeners. You're in great shape, you look good, so it wasn't a matter of the dieting. And you came at it through like, I see that this certain group of people are living healthier. Why is that? And I find you find that as an atypical you find that your way of coming to dieting and this evaluation of food a little bit different than most people?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first, I mean, I don't talk about diet because I think that the connotation is attempting to lose weight. But the actual definition of a diet simply means a pattern of eating. So it's just the way that someone eats. So like when you look at people who live in their homelands in like Asia, Africa, whatever, their diet is different from the standard American diet. And if you even think about the standard American diet, you break that down into an acronym, it's spelled SAD. So,
hey, dang.
Yeah,
Hold up, you said it's breaking out to SAD. Oh my goodness, what's that? What's that mean? What do you mean? How you?
So the standard American diet is simply the typical dietary pattern of the typical American. So standard S, American A, diet D, SAD. So when you look at the way that Americans typically eat, we have a diet that is high in refined grains, high in added sugars, high in saturated fats, sodium, low in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and seafood. So you put in like all of this sugar and all this processed food into our bodies, it sends us crashing, and then it makes us sad and or depressed. So I started to pay attention to the fact that a lot of times, I mean, I don't think that it's any coinky-dink that we have more people diagnosed with mental health disorders now than way back when. And then you like put that on a graph and you look at the number of people who are eating out and who are eating like frozen meals, food out of a bag or a box. That has also skyrocketed because the industry has kind of taught us that cooking is a source of contention in the household, right? Nobody feels like doing it. Nobody has the time because we're always sitting in a car, driving to work. We're sitting at a desk. We have things to do when we get home. So we made cooking, the industry made cooking seem like it was bothersome. So then they came out with TV dinners and all of these other things so that we wouldn't have to, quote unquote, be bothered by it. So we took out the whole socialization aspect of cooking, and now you have all of these people who are now depressed and anxious and all of these other things because they're eating food that's out of a bag or a box.
I mean, you're dropping mad gems, and you're blowing my mind right now because I be thinking about like how, you know, a really good home cooked meal, a healthy one, not only is that, but it's like social. You know, you're cooking together. You know, I know that pre-kids, when I guess I wasn't so busy, you know, me and my wife would cook together. It was a very just a way of spending time together, and then you actually have the meal and you sit and you talk during the meal. So I definitely see that social piece into it, rather than we all just eat at the TV with the TV trays, you know, and there's no socialization there. Like, so it's crazy how intertwined food is with just culture and spending time together and family. So when you went back and you started evaluating what is wrong with food and going through this journey for yourself, did you notice that when you started this lifestyle or this pattern change in how you eat, did you notice your mood improve?
Definitely. I mean, in the beginning, like all things, I didn't switch in the best manner. So I switched, and then I started buying like the fake meat, so like tofu nuggets and things like that, because I still wanted that texture of meat. And then, of course, buying the tofu, most of the time it's not non-GMO. So I was still putting all of that soy into my body with all of that estrogen, and I don't need any more estrogen in my body.
No.
So I still wasn't cooking with more holistic foods. But now that I'm eating more whole foods, I definitely feel a change.
And what are some, you know, like just for listeners, what were some of the changes and how do you keep track? Was you sleeping better? Like what did you actually start noticing? Like what was, you know, just your stomach felt good? What's some things that you're like, oh my God, like why, you know, this is a miracle or something, you know what I'm saying? Like, or was it immediate or it was slowly over time? Like you really didn't it wasn't like some day you woke up, it was just an over long process that you noticed some differences.
Well, the main thing is going to be the grossest thing. So, of course, I'm pooping more often. I go about 1 to 2 times a day. Like my body is on a schedule. It's either as soon as I wake up, after I chug my glass of water, and or as soon as I get home from work. So I'm pooping more often. It doesn't smell as bad because I haven't eaten red meat regularly since high school, but I'm not eating as much meat, so it doesn't smell like dead animal carcasses when I go.
True. I mean, I guess we have to have your husband be the judge of what it smell like dead carcasses. I don't know. Maybe, like some people say your shit don't stink. Maybe it don't. I don't know. But, so you notice it, okay, so your digestion, and mine is just the pooping part. Did your gut, your stomach feel better? You like?
Oh, definitely. I don't feel bloated. Like, I can tell, because, I mean, I don't eat healthy every single day. Like, I consider myself a healthy eater Monday through Friday. Like, my meals are planned out and all of that stuff. But I'm also a big foodie. So when I go out to eat, I order what I want. And I can always tell that my body is not feeling what I ate over the weekend, because usually by the time Monday rolls around, I'm still full from the meal that I ate on Sunday, which means that those carbs and all that processed food is just sitting in my gut. And if it's just sitting in my gut, then that means that it's not moving out.
So you have a hangover.
Right, exactly. So I've heard of an analogy that went like this. So if you were to take a steak, put it on a plate, sit it outside on a 100-degree summer day, and leave it out there for days on end, flies are going to attract to it. It's going to grow all of this bacteria, mold, and all this other nasty stuff, and it's going to change colors. So if it's outside for a 100-degree day for 3 days, it takes beef about 3 days to move out of our body. Our bodies are 98.6 degrees. So you take that same steak and you put that in your stomach and it sits there for 3 days. What is it doing inside your body? Do you think that it's better or worse? So then you have that. Yeah, so then you have that steak kind of sitting in your gut. So that means that when it comes out, it's going to smell really bad, and then it's either going to smell really bad coming out of the bottom, or it's going to smell really bad coming up from the top. So a lot of times when people have like bad breath and things like that, it's because there's some type of gut issue going on because of the food is just compacted in there.
Or it's in their teeth too. They don't floss, and it's nasty. And they got halitosis. But and this is my counter argument. The people like. There's people that, like, I guess there's physical anomalies, or people could just eat whatever they want. I feel like they don't get jacked up. You think that it's, it's just kind of like knowing yourself when you're doing this, this journey of eating whole foods and eating better, that your way of you digesting food and what you did for yourself could be a little bit unique or different for others.
I think yes, because we're all different. I mean, we're all chemically different. Our gut microbiome is going to be completely different, which means like the bacteria that's in our body. But I also believe that the body keeps the score, and that's also a name of a book, and that talks about trauma. So when you think about like people who are constantly ingesting processed foods, that's a trauma on the body. So they might not feel that trauma right there that day, the next day, or the next month, but the body will keep the score. So maybe they don't develop high blood pressure or diabetes, but maybe they develop Alzheimer's later in life, because now Alzheimer's is being called type 3 diabetes.
Interesting. So it's just different for each folks, and we just need to kind of be mindful of it. Do you when you chart these things, how religious are you with keeping track of what you're eating? Do you write it down? Do you just kind of know over time that you kind of like now have it as just a kind of set standard in the back of your head? Do you stay super structured with it? How does that work for you in regards to keeping track of what you're doing?
Yeah, I don't write anything down, but that's just my personal preference, because I don't want to be so meticulous with my eating habits that now eating is no longer fun.
Yeah.
So
Right.
so yeah,
Right.
I don't write things down. If maybe I were extremely overweight and I needed that type of accountability because I never paid attention to what I put in my body, then yeah, maybe writing things down would be healthy for me. But as far as myself and my psyche, it's not helpful for me to write things down.
Excellent. And I was thinking about like, and I had a little outline, but I'm about to go on tangents. I just go all over the place. But in regards to, you talked to a big about social racial connection to this. Did you see any challenges when you were switching to changing your food to a more healthy lifestyle of just some I guess obstacles or not confrontation, what I would say, like some people hating basically on this and just like not being supportive of this and giving you some I say backlash but just like uh negative feedback or whatnot.
I would say my biggest critic in
Mhm.
terms of my eating habits is my dad. I
Yeah.
mean, my dad is this kind of like country southern man.
Mhm.
The like last week when I went to go see him, he was talking about how he went from eating regular potato chips to now eating baked potato chips, and he
Oh,
could tell like
look at him, big
I know,
step.
I know, and he could tell like the difference in his body. He feels like his stomach is going down, right? So I was like, so my natural response as a counselor is to kind of push him a little bit further. So I say, wow, imagine if you didn't even eat baked potato chips. Imagine the changes you would see then. And he said, nah, I don't think there would be any change. So it's kind of like, what?
For
I
what?
know. It's like, are you kidding me? If you switch from eating baked potato chips to eating cucumbers with some good, like, homemade jalapeno hummus, or even if you don't want to go, like, that healthy, if you dip it in, like, some homemade Caesar dressing or just with, like, some salt and pepper and a little bit of malt vinegar, you're definitely going to see the change. So, like, he's my biggest hater.
And I think that is I think a lot of things you say, you brought up some good options, flavor, and I think a lot of people have a lot of hard times. I mean, I like fruit. I like just eating apples, and there's definitely a lot of sweet, good fruit. You know what I'm saying? So, but a lot of people don't think that healthy food has flavor. They think it's boring. They need, all that flavor. So, what were some things that you had to, for yourself, or maybe you're not yourself, but just other people? Like, how do you tell them like this is still flavorful? Like, I don't know. How do you sell it? How do you sell it to the people that are in opposition of the flavor and just the healthy options and stuff like that?
I don't I don't think healthy food lacks flavor. I think that people don't know how to cook anymore. And
Mhm.
people aren't open minded to eating foods from other cultures. So like
Mhm.
Indian food and Thai food is one of my are two of my favorites, and they have a lot of vegan options. So like that, those two countries have like the most like amazing like flavor profiles in their food because they combine things that are opposites that just make like a completely unique flavor. I think that people, my black people, are gonna kill me for saying this, but I actually think that soul food lacks flavor. I think that what reels us in. I
All
know,
right.
I know.
All right.
I think that what reels us in with soul food is the fact that it hits our bliss point. So the bliss point in food is the perfect combination of fat, sugar, and salt.
I was about to
So
say that.
really,
Yeah.
yeah. So really, when you talk about soul food, everything is loaded with fat, sugar, and salt. And then when you even think about the seasonings, it ain't nothing but garlic, onion powder, maybe a little bit of chicken adobo or like crushed red pepper. But it's nothing that's gonna like it's nothing. Yeah, and it's just salt, and fat, and salt, and sugar. But it's nothing. Yeah, it's nothing that really like wows you. It's just like, ooh, this tastes good, but that's just because it hits that bliss point.
I agree with you. I definitely hear that. What you call it? I was watching a documentary on Netflix, and they were saying like the basic one was, I think it was like salt, fat, and acid are like the basic flavor things that you intertwine in different cultures, but other cultures have used fat, salt, and acid better than we have, And as you said earlier, with the three different things, they show like different countries in the world and how they use salt, acid, and all that in different ways. But you spoke really well about how soul food is pretty not as super different. And I was thinking before I even talked to you, and I saw in the outline, we had this attachment to soul food. But if you really think about in regards to what we're eating, I ain't gonna lie, I love it. But what we're thinking is we're eating the worst part of animals. We're eating the scraps. We're eating the things that our ancestors ate out of necessity, and just dumped a bunch of flavor on it. As opposed to it wasn't the most healthy option. It was a necessity option. Like, the slave owners got the best part of the pig, and we had to eat its intestines and feet. You know what I'm saying? So we culturally have that tied to it, and I think that while it does have a lot of, I guess what you say it doesn't have flavor, but it does have this certain tie to it. At the end of the root of it too, it wasn't super healthy in the first place.
Yeah, a lot of times when we eat, we're eating from memory. So like when I think about soul food, I'm thinking about the memories that I have with my family, right? I'm not necessarily eating it because I just really want some soul food. It's because I'm craving that memory, so I'm trying to bring that back.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, think about most times at home. I don't feel like I make soul food at home unless it's a Thanksgiving. Then that's when I start making collard greens and
it's too much work.
Big family meals. Yeah. So I do agree with you, and I think that it is tied to a cultural aspect, but at the same time, just because it's tied to a cultural aspect doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy. There's a lot of things in our culture. There's a lot of things in cultures that have memories and good things, but don't is healthy, right? I have memories of college of drinking a lot. It don't mean I'm gonna drink a lot all the time just to have reminiscent college days, but you're right. Like there is a tie to it, but just because you have a tie to a memory doesn't always necessarily mean it's the most healthy memory in the present moment.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I think that's crazy. Yeah, go ahead. No, I was just saying I don't think it's time.
Yeah, I mean, if we really want to tie food to culture, then maybe we need to take it back a bit further than just what our enslaved ancestors used to eat. Maybe we need to take it all the way back to Africa. And when you look at what Africans eat, they're eating more greens than we eat now. Their fiber intake is, I think, 700 times higher than what we eat now. So we really need to be eating like our ancestors.
Yeah, what are they eating? I mean, this sounds super, super ignorant, but the only thing I know from African cultures is jollof rice, and that's the only thing that pops in my head. That sounds super ignorant, but that's the main thing that pops into my head when I think of Ghana and things like that. But I'm pretty sure a lot of their diet too. I know a lot of cultures don't eat a lot of red meat because in certain cultures that is super sacred or super scarce, like cattle. So a lot of countries don't eat cattle because you don't eat cow because that's India is a sacred animal, and certain cultures you had one cow for everything else, for milk and stuff. You don't eat that cow. So their diet wasn't really based on cattle as much as we are.
Yeah, it's almost like in every other culture but American culture, meat is basically the side and not the main piece of the meal.
Yeah.
So if you even when you go to eat, I find myself doing this a lot. Like when you go to eat, if you look at your plate as a whole, if you go to a ethnic restaurant or something like that, the meat is going to be a small portion. You're going to get a bunch of white rice. You're going to get a bunch of whatever vegetable they're serving, and then it's going to be like this little bit of meat on top.
I mean, that's facts. It's all facts.
Mm-hmm.
No, so I mean, do you ever think about with this journey into food, and tying it to our counseling degree, that now you're starting to think of things in a deeper level? And I don't know, it's like you can over nerd out on this, even write a whole dissertation and PhD on it. You think that in regards to this, it's this complicated, or how can we make it super simplistic? not overthinking it as much? Like, where is that balance for you?
Mm, I think that we need to overthink it because I think that as Americans, we're really good at turning a blind eye to things that don't apply to us. But food applies to everyone, so we need to think about it more. And food is culture. So if I don't pay attention to the way that I eat, then now I'm going to pass that on to my children. That's going to then be passed on to their children. So I'm passing on all of these diseases to my family, thinking that it runs in my genes, but really it's not in my genes per se. It's those food habits that I'm passing on to my family. So I think that it needs to be taught. I think that it needs to be thought about. I'm constantly thinking about it, but that's because I'm always listening to podcasts and things like that. So I'm just constantly trying to glean all of this information. It could be heavy. It could be a lot, especially when you take it to like a macro level and you look at like food deserts where people are living in places where there's not a grocery store within like 5-10 miles or whatever, and they have to get their groceries from their corner store. Like there's usually not fruits and vegetables. But then it's also hopeful when I hear things such as community organizers who, like doctors are writing prescriptions for fruits and vegetables instead of prescriptions for pharmaceuticals, so that people can actually go get their fruit and vegetables instead of paying for those drugs.
I think it's you brought up a very good point. I think that, I was driving with my wife and we were just randomly in like some part in Arlington, and we was just noticing like how like certain cities are urban places, and we just like, where's the closest Safeway? This is crazy. And we noticed that you're right, like on a systematic level, it's like, why is the access to healthy food harder for certain populations and areas? And and we were thinking in the grand scheme of things, is that orchestrated that way on purpose, or is just like by happenstance, like, and then you start thinking like the grand scheme of like, is this on purpose that places have more access, and is this very tied to social economic status and class? And I at a certain point had to be like, yeah, you have to believe it is, yeah,
Exactly.
like it has to be like. I always thought about it. It's so much the accessibility of people with money to good, healthy living, um, compared to people that are poor is very apparent. Like, if you are not of money, it's harder. Like, you have access to a gym, you have money to the gym, you have money for good food, and it's just crazy how much tied health and wealth are tied together, in that regard, and if that makes sense.
Right. Right. I mean,
additionally, health, wealth, and mental health is tied to all them together.
yeah, I mean, in my own neighborhood, I have 5 grocery stores within a 2-mile radius of me.
Yeah, I mean, I can count right now. Right here in Burke, where I live, there's so many grocery stores, and
Yeah.
it's crazy. And I think about that too, like you were saying, access to when you're in jail, and I'm pretty sure you saw the nasty meals they were feeding prisoners, and that is just cutting corners and also treating people less than human or less humane.
Exactly. Exactly. Because being incarcerated should be the punishment, but you shouldn't be punished while you're in there as well. And they
Right.
find so many ways to punish people while they're in there, but simply being incarcerated should be the punishment.
I get that, and I think that there's a tie to um, access to good food. That the fact that you're addressing this, not only from a racial standpoint, is a social. It should be food and all this stuff is quite honestly a social justice issue. Do you believe that too?
Definitely. Definitely.
Right. And like, and we can go further about the meals in schools and making sure kids. I know one thing that was very interesting to me is that while my wife worked for a Head Start program, they purposely try to give kids exposure to fruits and vegetables, little preschool kids, because they just wanted to start those healthy habits early, and they realized that the tie to getting kids exposed to vegetables and fruits early as little kids, they will grow up, eating fruits and vegetables, and not having such an adversity to healthy food if they're exposed to it in preschool. And it was just so interesting on Richmond Highway. Little kids was eating fish and eating all kinds of things that you just instead of chicken tenders and fries and stuff like that. And
right.
I think that it is a social justice issue to get kids exposed to good food early. And it's so interesting that if you do that, it becomes that pattern. Because my two boys, they would prefer to eat fruit and vegetables over. I think my kid is the only kid that doesn't like mac and cheese. And he might eat the chicken nuggets, but he hates mac and cheese. But if you give him an apple or grapes or carrots, he loves that stuff. And it's almost not because we're great parents. I think it's just that those are the things that we have around rather than the bad stuff around. It's just access.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you don't want your son to grow up and be my old coworker who doesn't eat fruit and vegetables.
I met a grown man child that only ate pizza and chicken tenders, and he was a grown man.
That is so disgusting. I know.
I was like, how you a grown man that only eat that? And also, it's not worldly. Like, it's like, what? Like, I'm not going to say, I'm not in shape. I'll be quite honest with the listeners. I'm not in shape like I used to be when I was powerlifting, but at the same time, I love food from all over the world. And I think that food that is not our culture is another way too. I love learning about new people and meeting new people, and then one of the ways I found the easiest to learn about new people and meet new people is at the dinner table. And so
exactly.
So by limiting yourself and only eating chicken tenders and French fries, like where are you? You're not going. What if you go to another country? You're not going to eat. There's no. How are you going to meet new people if you only eat chicken tenders and French fries in another country? Like you're short.
Totally agree. Yep.
So, what are some tips to get started? Like, what did you like? You kind of went and took us back, but let's not just talk about us. What was some way like, someone was like, I want to do this lifestyle, and I'm not saying you adhere to a diet, just maybe a healthier lifestyle. Do you even have a name what you're doing, or is it just healthier whole food? It's not like South Beach. Do you have a name to what this tip is, or just overall saying when I help people that want to get help about what they eat, it's just we're going to talk about food. We don't have a name for this diet.
Nope, it's just eating more whole foods.
Yeah, so when you have someone getting started with eating more whole foods, what are some tips? Like, literally, I am ground zero. I am that guy that eats only chicken tenders and fries. What would you tell me? How do I get started?
So I would say read the nutrition label, because most people don't do that. We eat with our eyes first, so we look at the packaging on food. So usually when I do my webinars or when I do my presentations at organizations, I say if it's sold in a bag or a box, you have to think about the fact that those are usually the items that's going to kill us. And what do they do with dead bodies? They put them in body bags and in boxes.
Jesus Christ.
Right.
Right. Well, let's start this webinar on a positive note. Put you in a body bag, Lord. Okay, but that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah. So look at the nutrition label. Compare the amount of fiber to the amount of carbs in it. And then also look at the ingredients label. The first three ingredients are the first three ingredients in the ingredient section is the highest amount of ingredients that's in there. So if your first ingredient is corn, sugar, and then high fructose corn syrup, then you know that you're not getting anything in your body that's of nutritional value.
Oh, man. So, okay, you got the labels. What about, man, I'm broke. What can I do for the broke man? What can we do to start for the broke man?
I would say start with substitutions. And if, let's say, like, you're like, oh, well, groceries cost too much. Okay, well, if you can't afford to buy the fresh produce, then buy frozen, because the frozen food is frozen at its nutrient, like, optimal point. So go from fresh to frozen. If you can't afford frozen, then buy canned, but buy canned with no salt added. Okay. And then just substitute some of the things that you eat. And it's actually somewhat cheaper to eat more whole foods, because meat costs more than a bag of beans. meat
Wow.
costs more than a bag of broccoli. So start with substitution. So like if you drink like cow's milk, then switch to, I would say, coconut or cashew or almond milk. If you're eating like potato bread, switch to honey wheat and then the whole wheat, and then to sprouted Ezekiel bread. If you just cannot give up the cheese because it's crack for you, then try to buy quality cheese that's made from grass-fed cows, because you know that the cows that are eating off of the grass, they're getting their typical diet that they should be eating versus the corn and the soy from cows that are just kind of like herded. And then be mindful. Yeah, and then be mindful of your snacks and things like that. And, I mean, like I said, you still need to live your life. So if you are craving something, then see if you can make it yourself. Like, I haven't gone out for pizza in ages because I make, like, bomb pizzas. So I'll just buy, like, naan from the grocery store or the already made pizza crust from BJ's, and I'll put tomato sauce up there. I still put cheese on it. And then instead of using, like, pepperoni, I might use ground turkey that's hormone-free and antibiotic-free. And then I might add some fresh chopped basil, tomatoes, maybe some figs. Like, it's super colorful. So try to make things yourself instead of going out to get it, because that'll help you kind of curtail all of that fat, sugar, and salt.
That makes a lot of sense. And have you, over time, I mean, I guess you just had to budget it and grocery shop better. Is it just like the money part? Once you learn how to shop safe or shop smart, money is not really an issue at that point.
Yeah, and I grocery shop at Aldi. Like, Aldi is my first stop for the grocery store, and then when I have, like, little taste or I'm feeling bougie, then I'll go to Whole Foods for like 2 or 3 things and eat all the samples while I'm in there. But like my first stop is the cheap grocery store.
Now, you're married? How does your husband online with this, or does he have his own kind of thing, and you kind of let him eat the way he wants? Are you trying to help keep him healthy? How does that work? Is he like?
Oh no. You know, I wouldn't have been able to marry him if he were a picky eater or anything like that. He eats just as healthy and maybe a little bit more healthier than me. He eats like a bodybuilder, though. Like, he'll meal prep, like, chicken breast and vegetables, and that'll be it for, like, his meal prep. But whatever I cook, he eats. Like, he's not a picky eater at all. Sometimes when I'm cooking in the kitchen, he's like, what meat you cooking? I'm like, oh, that's my chickpeas. Like, I'm not cooking any meat.
Gotcha. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I'll be quite honest with you too. If I had, my wife was that person that had the chicken tenders and pizza only palate, then it'd be hard because, as I said earlier, I love to share a meal, and I would love to go to a restaurant or have some nice food, and have someone that would not complain when we eat it. So I'd really struggle. I'd really struggle if my wife was a picky eater, because as I said earlier, for me, sharing a meal is not just sharing a meal; it's also having dates, and it's a social aspect too. So if I had someone that wasn't down with trying new foods, that'd be very difficult for me. Now, I'm also like the extreme eating. Like, I try to eat everything crazy. Like, I try to be like that dude Andrew Zimmerman. So my wife, she's not as adventurous as that. I'll eat octopus and snails and all kinds of crazy stuff because I don't, I just want to try everything. But at the same time, though, it's definitely good that we can go to different cultures, Thai, Chinese, Korean, Indian, Ethiopian, all these different foods, and my wife will go with me because, like I said, it is a big social aspect. And I think also you learn a lot about people's history and just culture from their food. I mean, it's so integrated into food is culture, so I think that. And now let me just phrase that, like, when you don't, I mean, I'm not saying everyone needs to be an adventurous eater, like to the Andrew Zimmerman, but I also think that there's a certain level of privilege. Like, I learned a long time ago that when I was studying abroad, that if someone offered you something that they prepared in their culture, and you have this, like, westernized, snobby air about it, that's so disrespectful. To say, like, I'm not going to eat this. I'm like, for real, like, You don't even know how much money this person spent. That could have been a week paycheck. I remember when I studied abroad in China, we were invited to someone's home, and it was a middle class gentleman's home, and he literally went all out with his paycheck to make a really nice meal for us, right? And in the back of my mind, I knew it was his. We were studying abroad, so his daughter was the one at the university, so we went to her parents' house, and it was like first gen. Very proud of their daughter for going to college, and they prepared this wonderful meal, and you knew that I mean, I was going to eat it regardless, but I noticed that some of the white students that came with me that wouldn't eat, I was just like, yo, just take a couple bites, because you don't know how much money this person had to spend to like make a meal, and he was so proud of himself. And
Right.
I don't know, I also get kind of irritated when people are picky eaters, because I feel like
Me too.
I get irritated because I'm like, you have this like not holier than thou, but like this
No, I'll call a
privilege.
spade a spade. That's what it is, and they're basic.
Holier than thou, but like it's more like a privilege, like white privilege.
Yeah.
Not only white people do it. That's why I can't say white privilege.
Yeah.
Americanized privilege, westernized
Yeah.
privilege. I don't know what that is, but when you do that, it's just like it's just disrespectful. I think that like I always like I don't say you have to like everything, but just try like a bite and say okay,
Exactly.
I don't rock with it. I tasted it. My palate just doesn't rock with it. But like just automatically off the break, like it looks different. I don't like it. That does irritate me. I have a hard time. I really don't like to go. I really don't like to go out to eat with picky eaters. Quite honestly, like positive filters. So I know that's not as positive, but I definitely cannot rock with we won't share a meal together and we'll do other things. But I don't want to go out to dinner and worry about what you're gonna eat. Um, and I definitely don't want to bring you around international friends and have you embarrass me. Like if I have my friend, one of my closest friends is Cambodian. If he invited me to a family get together and you come and don't eat nothing, that's embarrassing to me.
Mhm.
And I mean, we already established that it's just so culturally tied. So,
Yeah, definitely.
um, you said how to the dummies. We're jumping all over the map, but I wanted to touch on that last part, or not that last part, that one thing that you really we touched on the social part, the racial part, but I see on here you have a spiritual part. Can you talk about your spiritual attachment to food and that awakening per se?
So, I believe that we are divine beings put here for unique purposes, and we can't execute our purpose efficiently if we aren't functioning optimally.
Mm.
So basically, we can't pour into others from an empty cup. And if I'm only filling my cup with frozen entrees and takeout, then I'm not going to function at my best to then help others, whether that be my relationship with my husband, whatever child someone might have, and my work relationship, whatever. Because, I mean, it's kind of like sugar can make people, sugar has been known to a lot of times have the same symptoms as people who have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, right? So you load yourself up with sugar because sugar is in basically like all processed foods. It gives you that high, like mania. Then you come crashing down like depression. So you reload up with more sugar. So you're constantly on this up and down cycle. So imagine what it's like for the people that I'm connected to in my life to constantly be on that up and down cycle with me.
Oh man, that's some crazy. That's deep. And I also agree with you. Like we're talking about wellness and well-being. I mean, like, the key part of wellness is good sleep, getting sleep, having healthy relationships, and then having a healthy vesicle, which is your body. And you're right. Like you can't live a holistic life if you feel like crap all the time. And
Mhm.
how can you be a good helper to others if you feel like crap? Like I think that there's probably maybe a personal responsibility to take care of yourself. If you want to take care of others, you have a responsibility to take care of yourself because you can't take care of others if you're feeling like crap.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like the self care thing, but at the same time, you're adding not only self-care is relaxation and sleep, but you're also saying a crucial part of self-care is what you eat.
Exactly. It's the very basis of self-care.
Yeah. Do you think that in a general sense, when they teach about do you think that integral that this kind of training should be integrated into new practitioners, particularly doctors, or as well as new counselors about this subject material? Because I definitely think there is a tie to their occupations.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everybody tells us to eat healthy, but nobody knows how to eat anymore. But I think that nobody really knows how to eat anymore because of our government telling us what is good, what isn't good. On the news, it's saying, oh, well, don't eat a tomato because it's filled with this. And people are just like overwhelmed and they don't know what to do anymore. And doctors really don't even get the education. I've heard plenty of doctors on my podcast say that they get like one class in nutrition. But that's because doctors are made to treat symptoms and not cure diseases. So, yeah, everybody needs to be more educated.
I like that. And then last thing I wanted to bring up, before we try some, my last section of the podcast. But you say you use disease differently. You spell it different. You say dis-ease. How'd you come about that, and what does that mean for the listeners?
So I'm not the generator of that. That came from Leslie Korn, from a training that I took. And so dis, of course, means not, and then ease meaning imbalance. So a lot of diseases, like medical diseases that people have, might not necessarily be based in genes and genetics. A lot of times it's simply because people are imbalanced. So I remember reading a stat that said only about 2 to 3% of cancer is solely because of genetics. So that means that 97 and 98% of cancer is because of the foods that we put in our body, the things that we inhale, the things that are in our environment that we breathe in. So we really are responsible for our fate the majority of the time. But we really don't pay attention to it because we'd rather eat for emotions than for necessity. We're very overfed and malnourished.
I love it. And so we're coming at near the middle or the end of the podcast. So we got a segment I call Shot for Shot, and that means you get to ask me any random question, not even related to this food, and I get to ask you any random question. That's why we call it Shot for Shot. So with that, do you want to go first or I go first?
You can go first.
All right. So I was obviously as a JMU double alum, I didn't have the pleasure of going to I did have the pleasure of going to James Madison. I didn't have the pleasure of going to George Mason as an undergrad, and I bet it was a different experience. Can you share, or what was one of your most memorable undergrad experiences at Mason? And then maybe a double part is if you have gone back to campus, so it's kind of a two-parter. What is one of the crazy? I'm not crazy, but one of the things that you notice in the change in the university.
I unfortunately, the first thing that popped in my head was a negative experience.
Okay, you can go ahead and share that.
I have a positive one to balance it.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah. So freshman year, it was me and two roommates. We were the only black girls on our floor. And there was a wanted sign for a guy who was apparently like stealing things from people's dorm rooms or whatever. He was a black dude. So the wanted sign was like across the hall somewhere else. And then the next day, the sign got moved in front of our door, and the word nigger was written on it.
Oh,
so
no.
So that was my first experience with racism. But the good that came of it was we had a floor meeting, and everybody talked about it, which, of course, made us feel like the oddballs out. But my positive experience was becoming a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated my freshman year. I think that having that experience and building those bonds with everyone was like the dopest experience ever.
I think you turned it around. You found your people even in a negative situation. Were some of the So even out of that situation, when you had to I might have to jump and add a little bit more, but when you had the discussion about this issue on your floor, um, like was it a town hall? Can you describe that and how maybe did anything positive come out of that like terrible situation? First of all, sorry that happened to you, but did anything come out of that?
No. It was just one of those things. It was just one of those things where the RA just met with everybody on the floor and was like, "This is unacceptable," and the end.
The end. All right. Well, we need to know they probably need to do better, and hopefully they have. And then you said you joined as a freshman. So that was your spring usually, right? The second.
Yeah, spring. Yeah, spring of 7.
So wow, you had a whole experience of
I know.
In there. That's excellent. Do you still keep in touch with your line sisters?
Of course, especially my girls that I call the freshman 5, because it was 5 freshmen on the line, so we're really tight because we had all of those years together.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. All right, so you get to ask me a random question.
What's one change that you can implement tomorrow as far as your food intake?
Oh, gosh. All right. So I've been going back and forth. I tried paleo and I dropped down a lot. What I'm going to try this for the listeners, is I'm going to try to cut back. I love steak. I'm going to try to cut back on red meat and see. You know what I'm going to do when I cut back on red meat? I'm going to see if I noticeably, as you said with that sun, I want to see if I notice it. Now, summer's coming up, and obviously this episode is going to be released later when I come back from my summer break in the future. So this is speaking it into existence in the future when the listeners listen to this back. So as I know, summer is probably going to be a very difficult time to give up red meat, I bet. I want to see how long I can do it, too. I kind of want to test myself. Because, barbecue, steak, all that stuff. So I'm going to try that. And I'm not going full tilt giving up meat because I'm not going to lie to myself and think that I can just, go from 0 to 100. But I'm going to try the red meat. Technically, what's that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Does that just mean beef or beef and pork?
No, when people say red meat, they're usually talking about beef. But usually when somebody doesn't eat beef, they also don't eat pork.
That means no bacon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just stick with your beef. Just stick with your beef.
Okay. I'm gonna try my best. I mean, I definitely can give up steak. I mean, steak is hard to get sometimes. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
I like chicken though, and I like seafood. I definitely. If someone told me today, Philip, if I want you to be a pescatarian, I'll give you $1 million if you can do it for the rest of your life. I could do that, Joe. It's just seafood is hard to get. I mean, not hard to get, but it's expensive. I love shrimp and crabs. I love seafood, so I could be a pescatarian.
Me too.
Seafood is probably the best out of all.
Yeah,
technically, if it's meat, but I think seafood is. I can eat shrimp and chicken and fish. I mean, not chicken, but shrimp, fish, any shellfish, all the time. But it's like, think about how much lobster costs. Jesus, you know what I'm saying? That's the best seafood is the most expensive. Scallops, all that.
I know. My mom is pescatarian and my grandmother is a vegan.
So what does she eat as a pet? I mean, I guess fish would be the one that if you're a pescatarian and you need access to it, fish is. But all the other shellfish are more expensive.
Yep.
Okay, well, this has been a pleasure. You hit me with now a challenge, and I'm going to have to check in with you. I might have to put one in my Google Calendar. I'm going to start with 2 weeks first, and then from 2 weeks, I'm going to start gradual. So I'm going to start first now, 2 weeks. But this has been great. I think you shared a lot of information, a lot to think about in regards to the holistic part of food. I don't even know what I'm going to name this episode. Maybe just healthy food or something cool. I don't know. But this is great. I love having you on the podcast. This is the floor is yours. So this last part, however you want to finish out the episode, is called shout outs and plugs. I want you to shout out your family and friends and people that you want to definitely give a shout out to for this podcast. But also I want you to plug your ventures so that the listeners who are listening to this podcast have an opportunity to follow up with you. So shout outs and everything that all the plugs that you do, I want to make sure that you put that in the show notes so that people can follow up and follow along and get in contact with you. So the floor is yours. Shout outs and plugs.
I'm actually going to shout out Jewel Dockwin first because She pushed me into doing this by throwing me an opportunity, and then that kind of led me to forming my LLC. So now I'm going to plug my business. My LLC is called Kitchen RX, i.e. Kitchen Prescription, because I believe that the prescription for a lot of diseases can be alleviated by people getting in the kitchen. So you can follow me on Instagram at Tiffany, Tiffany, spelled the regular way, period, Kitchen RX. So Instagram, Tiffany, Kitchen RX. And I could be contacted via Gmail at Tiffany, kitchenrx@gmail.com. I come to churches. I go to businesses. I've done a talk at Section 8 Housing in Montgomery County. And I teach all about nutrition. I also teach about journaling and meditation. And I do webinars. So
excellent. And the webinars. What platform are the webinars that people they join in? How they do, like Zoom? How do when you do the webinars, how do people join in for the webinars?
I use Skype because I like for it to be interactive, and it's like a little small community. And I just started webinars, so I'm going to play with some other platforms later on. But right now, it's Skype.
Excellent. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I'm really glad that we ran into each other, and I'm glad the point of this podcast when I get my family and friends to get involved in this podcast is I know that in the resources there's so much knowledge that just people can share, and I know that the listeners will take back something from this episode that will help them be healthier and better people. So I really appreciate you being on the podcast today, and I'm always grateful for the opportunities to meet people such as yourself, in my educational journey. So definitely, you're changing the world. Hopefully, you're changing the way people, think about their bodies. I got a lot of things to think about. I'm still going to sip on my bourbon. I can't give that up. I'm not even going to lie. But I will think about more about other things, especially the one thing that you said about the things in the box. I mean, that was a very powerful and scary thing. Think about, like, a lot of food in boxes are probably not the best thing. So that was you dropped some real gems on here. So I really appreciate you being on the podcast. And if if I get famous one day with this podcast, and you want to be on it again, you can be a repeat guest. So thank you so much, Tiffany.
Thank you for having me.
All right, listeners of the podcast, you've heard. If you have any questions for the podcast, The Positive Filter, you can leave a voicemail at 571-336-6560. That's the podcast hotline. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook, Positive Filter, and we're on all the platforms. Thank you so much, and we're out.
Bye, y'all.
That was it. We did a podcast.
Cool.
So, like I said, I think let me look at I have my schedule written out. I literally have just been typing it out, and they come out every Monday. The only reason why I took a break is just because I wanted to get better, and also I was just kind of getting overwhelmed during the school year. So I wanted to take this summer to kind of chill, and that's why I recorded my episodes out. So let me see. Let me see what date this will go out. I have it listed. I have a Google sheet of all my different episodes. Podcast schedule. Okay, podcast schedule. And so August 19th.
Okay.
So go out. So you have plenty of time. I'll definitely touch base about getting all the things I need, like the show notes and stuff, and then we'll do like the sharing on Instagram and all that stuff. But your episode is August 19th. We can think of a name. I haven't even thought of a name yet, but we definitely got plenty of time. But thank you so much. So now it'll be scheduled out, and it goes out on Twitter. The promotion of the podcast will go out on Instagram, Facebook, and on Twitter. But all the stuff, the emails and all that stuff will be in every podcast. Has a show notes section where people can follow up with people and read about. So we have plenty of time. But yeah, it's gonna be August 19th. So if you want to put that in your planner, I believe that's the Monday, right? Yeah. Let me see. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, August 19th is that Monday at 6. So, it's good to go. So we got our podcast out, so we're good.
All right, thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate you calling in, especially after my kids go to bed. I know it's hard. That's why I had to do this doodle. Either I have my lunch break or nighttime, because these are the only times I can kind of squeeze recordings in. So I appreciate you for filling out the doodle and being available. So we're good to go. I'll keep you posted. I'll check in too, like before a week or so before I drop the episode, and make sure we get all the notes and stuff ready, and it'll be good to go.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, have a good night.
You too. Bye.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Positive Filter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.